It's been a while since we covered any Crusader Kings 3 content. Since our last CK3 video, Paradox released a new starting date of 1178, which covers a period of history full of famous historical figures like Saladin and Frederick Barbarossa, Alfonso, the first king of Portugal, the famous Eleanor of Aquitaine, Henry Kurtmantle, Tamar of Georgia, and many others. With a set of playable characters that includes a number of familiar faces found in Sid Meier's civilization, Paradox has managed to add a start date to the game that has revived our passion for CK3 and made us want to research the stories behind the characters you can newly choose to play here. And there is no denying that the Holy Roman Empire and its complex and special status within medieval Europe is one of our favourite starting positions in the game. So we decided to dedicate yet another video to this misunderstood political entity and its portrayal in Crusader Kings. This time, we will be analysing the extent and status of the empire in 1178, and again compare Paradox's depiction to its historical existence. We will first discuss the emperor and its rulers, the legendary Frederick Barbarossa and his Swabian power base, and then talk about some of the major dukes within the empire, such as the Vetin Margraves in eastern Germany, the Welf Duke Heinrich the Lion, the Babenbergers of Austria, or the Dukes of Bohemia. If you have any suggestions for what else we should cover in the new 1178 starting date, want to point out anything important we've missed, or simply want to give feedback, leave us a comment under this video. And if you like our content and want to show your support, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. You've heard it all before, but this really does help support the channel, as the engagement will encourage the algorithm to promote this video to more viewers. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, and are in a position to do so, check out our Patreon page, link in description. Now, with that self-promotion out the way, join us as we dive into the 12th century Holy Roman Empire and its depiction in Crusader Kings 3. So, let's begin with the state of the empire itself in the year 1178. The first thing I'd like to focus on is the man himself, Kaiser Frederick Barbarossa. It's worth noting that our very first video on this channel was on Barbarossa and about his depiction in Civilization 6. So, Barbarossa in this game is depicted as follows. He is from the famous Hohenstaufen dynasty, is 56 years old, has an ex-wife called Adelheid of House Rapotinen, and together with his current wife, Beatrix of House Ivrea, he has 9 children. The oldest, Beatrix, is 21. The first son, Friedrich, has passed away in 1170, and then his second son and current heir, Heinrich, is 13. The third son, also called Frederick, is already Duke of Swabia in the game. Barbarossa is described as brave, diligent, and arrogant. Most of this basic info is mostly historically accurate. Barbarossa was born in December 1122, so would have really been almost 56 at the start date of October 1178. It is also true that his first wife was Adelheid of Warburg, and that their childless marriage was annulled by the Pope in 1153 on the grounds that Adelheid was a very distant cousin of Barbarossa. This was shortly after Frederick's promotion from Duke of Swabia to King of Germany and Emperor-to-be. It is impossible to know for sure why Barbarossa wanted to get rid of his wife after it became clear he was to become emperor, but the lack of children gives us a hint as to why. We also know that for a bit he tried to wed a Byzantine princess, probably to increase his dynasty's legitimacy on the one hand and be able to brag about the noble background of his wife on the other. But this failed. Maybe because, as we've already discussed in a previous video, the Byzantines saw themselves as the real Roman emperors, and were still uneasy about the existence of the Holy Roman Empire. Anyway, in the end, he settled for Beatrice, Countess of Burgundy, who he married in 1156. Burgundy here refers to Franche-Comté, a region south of Lorraine, not to the Duchy of Burgundy. Hence Beatrice was only a countess when Barbarossa started fancying her. Still, as the only surviving child of her father, Reginald III, Count of Burgundy, she was the proper countess of this reasonably big domain. making her one of the most desired brides of the time. In fact, her uncle William III of Macon, who was her regent when she was young, tried to remove her from power and take the county himself. Beatrice's depiction is pretty accurate. Her family, the Anscarites, were actually referred to as the House of Ivrea. Barbarossa's children with her in the game are also historically founded. Her domain in eastern France, south of Lorraine, is also there, and we could even find the evil uncle that tried to oust her, who is called Guillaume in the game, the French version of William. It is also true that they made their second surviving son, Frederick, Duke of Swabia, when he was only 3 years old, in 1170. I'll talk more about Frederick later. And his older brother, Henrik, heir to the Kaiser throne, would actually eventually become emperor. Barbarossa's description as Crusader is also historically founded, as Barbarossa had famously taken part in the Second Crusade, alongside his uncle and Holy Roman predecessor, Conrad. The game, for some reason, gets the dates here a bit wrong though, since as you can see in the title history, Conrad's death year in-game is given as 1146, and Barbarossa's ascension to the Kaiser throne as 1152. In fact, Conrad died after they returned from the Second Crusade, back in Germany. Barbarossa was one of the only 2 people present at the dying emperor's deathbed, illustrating the special relationship he and his uncle must have had, giving us an insight as to why he chose Frederick, and not his own son and heir, to follow him as emperor. Barbarossa had a pretty good CV for the job too. Not only was he a descendant of the famous Hohenstaufen dynasty through his father, and having an uncle as the current emperor, but also through his mother's side he was related to the powerful family of the Welfen, which the game also gets right. He couldn't have been in any better position to become the next top dog. This was also aided by his strategic skills and military prowess, and so his reign was one of exceptional unity among the German duchies and principalities. It is portrayed correctly in the game that the Holy Roman Empire included Burgundy, Bohemia, and even Frisia and Lorraine during his time as emperor. But what also features in the game is the drifting away of northern Italy during the time of the Hohenstaufen emperors, especially during Barbarossa's reign. In fact, in the 3.5 decades that he ruled, the emperor went on no less than 5 Italian campaigns to preserve the HRE's influence in the region. And the 5th one took place in the 1170s, ending in 1177 with the Peace of Venice, right before the start date of 1178. Here, Barbarossa unsuccessfully fought the Pope, who had support from northern Italy, the so-called Lombard League. An alliance of cities formed in 1167 which included Verona, Padua, Vicenza, Milan, Parma, and many more. It makes sense that Paradox makes all these cities that had just won against their former liege independent realms, and I reckon the Empire's southern border is reasonable in the 1178 start date. But it's a pity that this war and the subsequent treaty isn't featured at all in the political relationships of this start date. In his book on the medieval legacy of the Roman Empire, historian Philip Potter describes the Peace of Venice as follows. In May, the envoys from the Pope, Lombard League, and Holy Roman Empire assembled in the Venetian Republic. And on the 21st of July, 1177, after prolonged discussions, finally signed the Treaty of Venice. The 3 parties agreed to a 6-year truce, and on the same day peace was arranged between Pope Alexander III and Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa. Potter even goes on to explain that, while in Venice, Barbarossa renewed the imperial treaty with the Doge, promising to preserve the peace with the Republic and its vassal towns. It would have been easy to include this truce, with at least the major political entities of CK3's northern Italy in the portrayal of the Empire. In addition to the game not featuring this, it also does not indicate the strained relationship that cleverly existed between the Pope and the Emperor. Neither does it feature any claims or even casus bellis against the northern Italians, simply putting them outside the de jure reach of the Holy Roman Empire. On a side note, Barbarossa was also pissed off at King Henry II of England for not honouring an alliance with him and helping him in northern Italy, none of which is present in the game. All these wars and disputes around northern Italy were the major issues of the Holy Roman Empire at the time, and it is a shame that they seem to get left out. But I guess in your playthrough, If you want to be historically accurate, you now know which way to turn as the Holy Roman Emperor. Barbarossa famously met his end while leading his armies in the Third Crusade, by drowning in the river Salef in modern southern Turkey, on the way to the Holy Land. I reckon you might have difficulty replicating that in your playthrough, unless there is a drown character console command I'm unaware of, but it would be a flavourful, unique event Paradox could include in a future update. We already talked about what the game calls the County of Besançon, which is controlled by the Emperor's wife, and about the Duchy of Swabia, the Hohenstaufen's seat of power, which is correctly shown to be owned by the Emperor's second oldest son, Friedrich. He was originally called Conrad, after Barbarossa's predecessor, but after the death of his older brother, he changed his name to Friedrich. Traditionally, historians have called this Swabian duke the fifth of his name, disregarding his older brother, also called Friedrich. But Barbarossa's firstborn was also officially the Duke of Swabia until he died, so Paradox correctly calls him Friedrich VI, which is also historiographic practice nowadays. But there is another blunder within the depiction of Swabia and its boy duke in 1178. As you do in CK3 and IRL, an underage prince ruling over a duchy would have a regent, which is in the game shown as Count Hermann of Baden. But there are several historians writing about Swabia in the 12th century naming another guy, Degenhard von Hellenstein, probably the most metal name I've ever heard of for a medieval duke, as the regent of Swabia in the 1160s and 70s, referring to the chronicles of Burkhard of Urschberg, a Swabian cleric and chronicler of the time. Moving on to Angria, we see it ruled by the powerful cousin of Frederick Barbarossa, Duke Henry the Lion, or, in Germany, known as Heinrich der Löwe. As we already discussed, Barbarossa is related to the powerful house of Welf from his mother's side, so his maternal uncle's son is part of this dynasty. In addition to this, he is the grandson of Kaiser Lothar, who ruled the HRE as emperor in the 1130s and who is correctly portrayed in the game as belonging to House Supplenberg. In pop history and legends, Heinrich is considered the most important German figure of the time next to Barbarossa himself. He was both Duke of Saxony and Bavaria, which is also portrayed like this in the game. And while historians have recently called into question the actual level of power and influence of Heinrich on the reign of Frederick Barbarossa, it is clear that, for a time, he was one of the most powerful dukes of the Holy Roman Empire under Barbarossa's rule. I'm stressing for a time, because at the time we are looking at, in 1178, after the Kaiser's defeat in northern Italy, Heinrich the Lion was far from stable in his position. In fact, since 1177, he had been at war with his vassals, most of all with Bishop Ulrich of Halberstadt, who had support from Philip of Cologne. Both Ulrich and Philip exist in the game, but unfortunately they are not shown to be at war with the Lion. The reason for the rebellion by his vassals was, on the one hand, that they actually felt oppressed, and on the other hand, it was the strategic fear of an overly powerful double duke, seeing as the two immensely powerful duchies of Bavaria and Saxony were both in his hands. Barbarossa was petitioned by both his cousin and the Saxon nobility and clergy about the conflict, and he decided that his cousin had overreached his authority over the Saxon nobility and church, and revoked his titles. If you think this story would fit the Crusader Kings' dynamics of vassals being mad at their liege holding too many titles and lieges retracting titles, I agree with you. Thus, it's a pity that this conflict covering the entire hierarchy of the feudal system here is not featured in the new start date. At least I could find Heinrich the Lion's successor as Duke of Saxony, although it was quite hard to find him. It is Count Bernhard III of Jüterbog, currently vassal of the Duke of Lausitz in the game. The future Saxon Duke is correctly portrayed as a member of the Ascanian family. However, again, any relation to the conflict brewing in the northwest of the empire, for instance an existing claim on the duchy, is missing. Since we're already in the area, I also want to briefly cover the Vetin family ruling over Lausitz and Meissen. These two duchy-tier realms are portrayed as Margravates, and their rulers Otto and Dietrich, accordingly as Margraves. This label is correct, and it is also correct that the two brothers ruled over this once unified Vetin land separately. Barbarossa had pressured their father Conrad to renounce his titles and take the vows, splitting up the lands into 2 Margravates ruled by his sons. You can also see the typical Vetin marriage politics in action, which aimed to intermarry the Vetin children with the Ascanian family, the other prominent house of Eastern Germany back then, and to the Piast family, the kings of Poland. Dietrich was married to Princess Dobroniega of Poland, and Otto's wife was Hedwig of House Ascanian. Just south of the Vetin-dominated Margravates, we see the Duchy of Bohemia, ruled by Duke Bedřich of Bohemia. Bedřich is simply the Czech version of the name Frederick in English, or Friedrich in German. It is interesting to note that, unlike his father, Bedřich never became king of Bohemia, hence his title in the game as Duke is correct. Although if you play as him, it is super easy to create the Kingdom of Bohemia and become the HRE's only kingdom. If you look into the title history of the Duchy of Bohemia, you can see that for a bit, the duchy was actually controlled by a relative of Bedřich, Soboslav. This was actually the case due to the special house seniority inheritance law of the Duchy of Bohemia. But Barbarossa had issues with Soboslav, so in 1178 he supported an alliance of Bedřich, his cousin the Moravian Prince Conrad III, and the Babenbergers of Austria, who Soboslav had attacked previously, to march on Prague, depose of Soboslav, and elect Bedřich as Duke of Bohemia. In the game, all these actors exist, but their dynamics only feature to a limited degree. At the very least, Soboslav is shown as the rival of Duke Bedřich. I guess it makes sense that Conrad III could not be the ruler of Moravia, as it would not have worked with the strictly hierarchical game dynamics, so he simply became the Count of Brno here. The last actor in this conflict for the Bohemian crown, the Babenbergers of Austria, are also the final duchy I want to look at today. Here we have Duke Leopold V of Austria, 21 years old and married to Princess Helena of Croatia, with 2 young sons and a daughter. In short, the perfect starting location to marry into the Arpad family and create a premature empire of Austria-Hungary. Leopold's father in the game is Heinrich II of Austria, and his mother is a Byzantine princess of House Komnenos. While this intermarriage of the Babenbergers with the Byzantine Basilius's niece is super fascinating, and true, unfortunately Leopold does not inherit the claims on the Byzantine Empire his mother, at least in the game, very much had. Leopold was Duke of Austria and in actual history also became Duke of Styria in 1192, where he died in 1194. His first son went on to become Friedrich I of Austria, but only ruled for 3 years before, like so many of his generation, he died on a crusade in the Middle East. But his second son, initially only meant to inherit Styria, went on to rule both duchies until his death in 1230, and was bestowed the epithet Leopold the Glorious. So what we can learn from this is, if you haven't had time to research primogeniture, just send one of your sons on a crusade to defend the Holy Land and all will be well. At least until you eventually run out of heirs and someone else has to step in. There are so many more interesting stories to cover about the Holy Roman Empire, its dukes, margraves and counts, and how they are portrayed in CK3. But that's all we have time for in this video. If you think we've earned it, give this video a like and make sure to subscribe to us for more CK3 and other historical content like this video, and tell us in the comments what we might have missed or should cover in future videos. See you next time for more history in bits.